Subscribe to 15 Second Spotlight on YouTube and to wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome everybody, very excited to be here today. My name is Katie Stoddart. I'm the founder of the Refocus, transformative leadership coach, but also keynote speaker, author of The Magic of Focus, and the host of the weekly podcast, The Focus Bee Show. Very excited to be here today with Stoyan Yankov.
Hey everybody, great to be here as well. I'm also a published author of the book Perform, the Unsexy Truth About Startup Success, international keynote speaker, productivity and performance coach, former movie producer, and somebody who's in love with 15 Seconds, one of my favorite events. Been attending the conference since 2017, every single edition. Hopefully see some of you this summer in Graz.
Amazing. And we're here today to dive a little more into high performance and productivity and what we actually sometimes struggle with and what we do about it. So Stoyan, maybe you could start if you're feeling vulnerable enough. What is one of your greatest productivity struggle?
Yeah, Katie and I were discussing last week. It would be great for two productivity and performance coaches to talk about their struggles, and hopefully you guys can learn something out of it. When it comes to productivity, for me, the days I'm not productive is the days that I haven't slept well. This is what I'm struggling with sometimes because, and we can talk about that after, me and Katie, we are very well organized people. We love all these productivity tools and tricks. For me, the struggle comes when I haven't slept well and I have a lot on my to-do list, specifically when it comes to decision making and creative tasks.
Yes, I think I also resonate with it for sure. If I'm feeling very tired, then in terms of decision making, quickly get overwhelmed. And in terms of creativity, it can be hard to seek that inspiration and find that mental space. So how do you manage the days where you actually haven't slept enough, but you still need to get through your to-do list? What are your coping mechanisms?
I think it's my mindset. I kind of push it through. I'm not going to be as productive as usual. I'm probably not going to be as creative as usual. But then you lean on your habits, right? As productivity coaches, as people into productivity, we know that if you want to be productive, you want to focus on one thing at a time. So if I had managed to organize my day in a way that my calendar looks very much blocked when it comes to the type of things I have to do, even if I haven't slept so well, I'll still focus on one thing at a time. And it's a little bit like a crisis management, right? You wake up and you have all those kind of ambitions of what you can get done this day. So yeah, that's what I do. I will just look at my list and I'll be like, okay, what's the most important thing I need to get done right now? In the next hour, this is the only thing I'm going to do. So, and we're coming back to some of the basics of productivity, right? Yeah. Identifying what's your final outcome, setting a clear intention before you start to do anything that you do. But I'm curious to learn from you, Katie. What do you do if you had a day you haven't slept so well, but you have a lot on your to-do list?
Yes, that's a good point. I think it's like you said, being very clear on what the outcome is and also reprioritizing. So I might choose to do different tasks that day that demand a little less brain power and focus on the tasks that are slightly more automatic or don't require so much mental work. But of course, if you have a workshop planned that day or coaching session or a talk, then you do it regardless. I think in general, it's good to build the habit of trying to have a regular sleep schedule and not changing it too much over the weekends so that we're not too tired during the week. And I think a lot of this comes down to the discipline of going to bed early because it takes discipline to get up early, but to get up early, we need to go to bed early to have had enough sleep. So I think that's just ongoing discipline, habits, routine, which sort of leads me to the next point, which we discussed a bit off air beforehand, which is How do you build your routine, your habits? How do you find the thought of rhythm, including sleep, nutrition, workload, organization, that works well for you?
And let me just touch upon what you just mentioned. I think it's a really good point that sometimes we feel guilty that we're not productive, and at the end of the day, we're human, right? So yeah, sometimes you're gonna wake up and you're not gonna feel good, and that's okay. So for me, it's reminding myself that I'm human and regaining perspective. What if I don't have a productive day? What if I actually take a day off? Sometimes taking a day off could be the most productive thing I can do. So gaining this perspective, the long-term perspective, that I don't need to be productive today. I need to be productive in a year period, right? That being said, what are the kind of habits that put me in a good place? I mean, I'm probably not going to say something that's unique and nobody heard about. It's not about coming up with these magic pills and crazy things nobody does. It's about doing the stuff that works. In my case, this is going to bed early, eating well, sleeping well, exercising, doing meditations, taking breaks, being around positive people. But it's not about those kind of things. It's about the habits of doing it consistently. And when I do these type of things for these rituals for a number of days in a row, I can just feel so much more productive, more creative, in the zone. You know, your mind is focused on the positive. What are yours, Katie?
Definitely the basic sort of four pillars of sleep, exercise, nutrition, and meditation and rest. I think they're fundamentals, but it's like you said, it's about the consistency of them. And then you also touched upon this important part, sort of positive peer group or friends. And this is where I really noticed, for me, this makes a huge difference. So I can have the basics in place: good night's sleep, eating healthily, exercising, meditating in the morning. But if I'm not socializing regularly, after a while, and we're both extroverts, so I know you understand me, after a while my energy gets depleted. And even if I'm doing online sessions and workshops and coaching, this helps, but it's not the same as in person. So what I noticed is, as soon as I fall off the wagon of socializing as much as maybe I need or that fuels me, my productivity, my creativity, my motivation, my energy all diminish. So for me, it's not just remembering, okay, eat well and, exercise each day, but also, who am I seeing for, a quick lunch break? Who am I having tea with? Or am I having a really good phone call with a close friend of mine at some point in the evening? Just these things regularly, and by regularly I mean kind of every day. This is the difference between me performing at, let's say, 70, 75% to 95% of my abilities.
And I think it comes down to, a lot of it comes down to scheduling. And starting, there was a quote by Alan Lacaine: planning is bringing the future into the present so that you can do something about it now. And if there's one thing I want the audience to remember from me, from this conversation, it would be: make time to organize your time. Make time in your calendar to identify your priorities, identify your goals, decide what to do and what not to do. I learned something from a very interesting place, I would say. I used to have an English teacher, and but she wasn't an English teacher. She was an English teacher for 6 months, and I called her in this period. I had a conversation with her, and she told me, that was probably 15 years ago, she told me, the way I manage my time is I define what are my 3 priorities for 6 months. And then after 6 months, I reevaluate and maybe set other priorities. And that way, I don't feel the fear of missing out. Right? These are the priorities for this specific period. So identifying what are your priorities at the moment and how much time and energy are willing to allocate to those priorities is the first step to be able to properly plan and organize your workload on a weekly and on a daily basis.
Yes, and I'd say both professionally and personally. So if we come back to what I was saying about socializing, it's exactly what you said. For me, it's kind of always a priority. It's sort of mental and emotional well-being. But sometimes it's as if I forget it and I get caught up in other things. And then I realize that I haven't been socializing as much or seeing as many people or reconnecting with friends. And then I have this wake-up call and realization again. And then I do something about it. But it's exactly what you said about scheduling. And I'm based in Sweden, and in Sweden, people plan their weekends 1 or 2 weeks ahead of time. So if you have the initiative to pause and think, what will I do 2 weekends from now? Message a few people, invite someone around for dinner, then you can have something planned each weekend. But if you fall off the wagon of scheduling these things, then suddenly your social life goes down the drain, at least for a few weekends or a few weeks. And then you need to remember again. So I think for me, it's exactly what you said, having those top 3 priorities in your business and in your personal life in terms of goals, but also the maintenance goals. Because for me, social life isn't a goal. It's not an objective. Me eating healthily isn't a goal, but it's maintaining high level of high nutrition, exercise, sleep, as we mentioned, spiritual practice also, and then socializing. And so I check in with myself pretty much every week and think, okay, how did we do in these areas? Wasn't exercising as much as I normally do. Back on track, book some, scheduling, exercise sessions, same with the socializing. So it's also important to look at what are some of the areas that you want to maintain in your work and your life and make sure that you make space for them every week. Because you can't just not sleep for a whole week or not eat well for a whole week. I mean, you can, but these things have consequences on your energy and performance afterwards.
Everything has to be personalized. You can get any kind of book. Katie has a book. I have a book. There's thousands and millions of books on productivity, but you got to try it out. You got to test it. But I recommend everybody listening to try and find your rituals. When you talked about I'm checking in to see whether I pay enough attention to the most important areas, reminds me of a friend of mine who was a guest on my podcast. His name is Nick Elston. He is having this little ritual where on a weekly basis, he's going to grade himself on the top 10 most important areas in his life, from 1 to 10. So he makes sure that if something doesn't get enough attention, he regularly checks. Right? So that's one tool. I personally love to evaluate my week. Every week, except when I'm extremely, somewhere on the road and I don't have the ability to. But every week, I'll sit down and I'm going to reflect on my week. What did I achieve this week? What did I learn this week? What did I fail to achieve and why? What new opportunities came around, personally, professionally? And then, this is the first part. The second part is, let me have a look at the next week. What are my goals, priorities, projects I'm on, meetings, everything that I should potentially pay attention to? Okay, good. Looking at my next week, and then I open my calendar, right? How do I make sure that everything gets appropriate attention? And we're coming back to being concrete on outcomes. And there's some things that you cannot really define an outcome, but at least the intention, right? Everything you do, it needs to be driven by intention. If you go to a vacation, what is your outcome? What is your intention? What is the result you want to achieve by being on this vacation? Right? Being intentional about what you do, and then, right, starting with the outcome, the second step, how do I get there? What's the easiest, simplest, most fun way for me to produce this outcome? Easier with the business objectives, obviously, right? Launch the web page. Okay, that's a concrete outcome. How do we get there? And then you step by step it and see if you can delegate some of them And finally, block it in your calendar. Commit to one thing at a time. Boom, ready to go.
All sounds so simple, but I think what you said about being clear on the outcome is actually a lot trickier than you make it sound. It depends. So some people have these goals and they come fully formed and you're super excited and you have a really strong why. Maybe you want to write a book, maybe you want to do that keynote TEDx, but sometimes some goals are a little more not so tangible. Maybe someone listening here wants to start their own business, but they're not sure what business to start, or maybe they already have their own business but they're pivoting a bit. And I know that in my case, when I struggle most is when my outcomes or goals aren't really clear, or if they are clear, let's say writing the book, then I'm not always clear about the journey that it would entail. With writing a book, it's quite straightforward. You need to write and have someone check your writing, and there's a whole process. But for the other aspects of the business, sometimes the road is a bit muddy and you're just like, I'm not sure which would be the next milestone for me to get to this business outcome. And in those moments, I know that it can be harder to prioritize your time, because what we really need to prioritize in those moments is some reflection time so that we can define those milestones and those actions. But often when we're uncertain, we tend to take lots of actions to avoid the feeling of uncertainty. And so what really we need to do is to slow down and pause and think about the goals, think about the direction, and reflect on what strategies we're going to implement, what support we can have along the way, what resources do we need to reach those outcomes. And it sounds really easy like this, but I know that in my case, clarity is what blocks me most of the time. Most of the time, I'm just like, how am I actually going to do this? And I know with a really strong why and a really strong passion, you can achieve anyhow, but sometimes you still need to have some sort of way of beginning that journey.
I love what you said. Sometimes it's difficult to define an outcome. And I would say in these cases, your outcome should be to clarify the outcome. You said it quite well. And reflection, that's the thing. I'm curious, Katie, do you have any kind of a daily reflection or planning process that you do to make sure that you stay on top of things?
Yeah, so I have my daily planning where I write my 3 main goals, my brief tasks. I also sometimes write a bold action, so it's sort of big, bold, and brief. Those are my 3 categories. Then I write what will I do after work as a sort of prep boost, which I'd heard from another coach, and I quite like that, sort of a reminder of there's life outside of work too. And then at the end of the day, I review and ask myself, how present was I? How much in flow? What contributed to this? And I even write from a scale from 0 to 100, how engaged was I in my work? And this helps me to see, am I finding meaning in what I'm doing, or am I just going through the motions? Is this an activity I really enjoy and I had like this fantastic conversation, or I love the coaching sessions, or this workshop went well? Or is it just like, yeah, I answered a few emails, wrote a blog article, blah, 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 but no real passion? Though generally I do enjoy writing also the blog article. So this helps me to sort of tune in with myself. It's a very short process. It takes me a few minutes. And the hardest part is actually the beginning of the day when I set my 3 main goals for the day. I often can't find 3. And I know this is going to sound strange. It's because if you have a day with a lot of calls and workshops and things planned, most of your day is taken. Let's say you've got an hour and a half free. Generally in that hour and a half, I do 1 big task. And then the other things are small, brief tasks that you sort of fit in between the calls. So often I don't actually even have 3 main tasks per day. I have between 1 and 3. And this is because I prefer to work fully 1.5 to 2 hours on one task, put all my attention into this, than to dilute it with a million different things. And so, yeah, that's my daily process. And I'm the same as you. I also have a weekly review where I check in on how am I doing my professional goals, how am I doing my personal goals, what have I achieved, how have I felt during the week, and yeah, checking with a few different things. Though I think I could probably improve it. It would be quite nice to have a visual. I do like this idea of grading each category out of 10 or having it on paper, because I often feel I'm just typing it and I just write the whole thing and then close and leave, and I'm not sure how much I've really deeply reflected on each area and each progress I sometimes feel doing it on the laptop, I don't internalize it as well.
I love the laptop way of doing it, but it's one confirmation that everybody is unique and different, and you gotta listen to who you are. For me, the process is usually at the end of my working day. If I'm to finish work at 6, 5:30, 5:45, I will simply stop and I will focus on reflecting on my day and planning my next day. In a similar kind of process, it's usually like it's inspired by many different systems, but I created my own system, the perform planning method, which is in very simple steps. The first step is to capture everything that's on, on my head, which is all the projects, all the meetings, everything that I potentially have to do. I make a big list, and I'm using spreadsheets, guys. So I'm a spreadsheet guy. You can use anything you want. Doesn't matter. It could be on your phone, on an app, piece of paper, you name it. But one place where I make a big list of all those things, and then I combine them and unite them, group them together. Because, hey, there's 6 tasks that are related to this contract that I want to, this deal that I want to close. Okay, cool. So there's something with the deal. There's something with inspiring my team. There's something to do with the accounting. Okay, there's actually 4 or 5 major things that needs to get done the following day. Cool. But now let me define what's the outcome. This is usually the third step. What's the outcome? Is it call customer X? It's probably not an outcome. Or if that's my outcome, I can call them and say, hey, customer X, how are you today? Great. Okay, bye. Check. No. I don't want to call the customer. I want something to happen. Close the project X for this amount and send them the contract. Good. This is concrete. This is specific. Now that I know what's the outcome, I reverse engineer it. Okay, if that's my outcome, what can I do step by step so I can get there? I can do some research. I can talk to my team and brainstorm some ideas. I can call the assistant of this decision maker and I can have a conversation and smoothen it. Whatever, right? What I need to find the most efficient way to get my outcome. And because I'm a spreadsheet person, that's not going to work for everybody, but I try to time everything. So I'll look at the whole list of outcomes and the step-by-step to get there. And for each step, I'll try to calculate the rough time it's going to take me to get it done. Complete this contract, hour and a half, 90 minutes. Okay, cool. Make a post on LinkedIn, 20 minutes, whatever. Okay, so I now have a big list of what are the outcomes, what are the step-by-step. Can I delegate some of these steps to somebody from my team so I can win time and focus on the things that matter? And then the final step, the 5th step, is to start blocking things in my calendar. Okay, so all right, now I'm very clear what are the most important outcomes to be done. I know the step by step. Let me start placing it in the calendar and see if it makes sense. And usually when you do that for the first time, you'll say, oh my God, I have 26 hours of things I want to do today. So you have to be more selective. And by the way, this is one of the best strategies to help you to say no. When you see how much you actually have on your plate, it's easy to say, no, Michael, I don't have 30 minutes for a cup of coffee with no reason at the moment. Call me 2025. Oh.
Okay, well, I have a different approach, though it's not totally different, but yes, I also have in Notion, I also use Excel a lot, but in Notion I have all the projects that I'm working on. Then I have all the deadlines related to the projects, some of which have none. So for instance, ongoing marketing with LinkedIn doesn't have a deadline, but then the different workshops that I'm giving, the clients that I'm working with, etc., they all have deadlines. Then I write all the next steps, and then I go through them and I don't time them, which is interesting, but when I do schedule them, I have them in mind. And then I always do a mixture of important and urgent. So what I tend to do is I start the day with something that's important, and this tends to be further away. What I mean by this is I might start my Monday morning with a workshop I'm giving in a month or in 6 weeks. And the reason for that is because, first of all, I quite like to prepare my workshops about a month before and then revise them about a week before. So I feel that a month before I don't have any stress. It feels like it's miles away, and so I can do it very calmly, just be in the flow, enjoy, prepare it. And then a week before, okay, it's coming up soon, then I revise, I have some new ideas, I tweak it. So I quite like to start with the important things, and it makes me feel like I'm on top of things, not just drowning in urgent. And then the rest of the day, so the important is generally between 8 and 10 a.m. and sometimes between 8 and 12 a.m. depending. And then the rest of the day I'm doing urgent things. So that can be quickly sending in that proposal. It can be checking in with the client. It could be seeing if the client has booked their next coaching session. It can be all the little nitty gritty things. And that's how I do it. And then I track it all in Notion. But I don't time everything. And I think part of the reason for that is, for me, my time management is directly linked to my energy management. So on some days, writing a LinkedIn post, I'm in the flow, I think about it as I'm walking to work, I just write it in 10 minutes, done. On other days, I'm not as inspired, maybe I think about it a bit longer, maybe I have longer to write and it takes me half an hour to 40 minutes. And so for me, it's just allowing that space in. But it's, yeah, I think social media and marketing would be a whole other topic, because I know that I've done everything from schedule a whole month of posts to force myself every day to find 10 minutes to write a post. I also did a whole point where I just didn't post anything for 6 months, and I thought, my business is going well, I don't need to post anything anymore. I don't think that. I think it is important to maintain your marketing. But yeah, that's also something that can be quite challenging when you're managing different things in your business and keeping track of all your marketing, unless of course you're delegating it to your team, which is also good.
I just want to emphasize on what Katie said. She's intentionally finding time every morning to work on things that are important and not necessarily urgent. And I don't know, those of you listening, how many of you will feel overwhelmed with things? There's always so much to do now, yesterday, right? But if you don't intentionally decide, I'm going to find time to work on the big picture things, the things that really will move the needle, maybe they're not important at the moment, but these are things that I need to start to deal with. There's a couple of great books, some of you might have heard. E04, Brian Tracy, a great concept, inspired by the quote of Mark Twain. If you have to eat a living frog, it's one of your to-do list tasks, do it first thing in the morning. Another book, The One Thing. Great book. By the way, the authors of the book, these guys are millionaires. They built the largest real estate company in the world. These are business people, serial business people. They wrote a book about their philosophy. And the whole philosophy is around a simple question. What's the one thing you can do such that by doing it, everything else is easier or necessary? Only by starting to ask this question on a daily basis, you become so much more productive. What if you start your day being focused on the one thing, the most important thing? You allocate enough time to make progress on your most important thing. And then your actual day starts, as Katie just stated, right? You can actually go and do the things that are urgent. Imagine the productivity that will come out of it.
And not just the productivity, the well-being, because we feel good when we're progressing on things that are important, and the connection to our purpose and purpose-driven. Of course, it's great to achieve more and get more things done during the day that we want to and are meaningful, but it's the purpose and meaning that come from it. I feel that the tricky part, though, is the same as what I was saying earlier, is knowing what that one thing is. But it's true that the more often we pause and we ask ourselves, what is really the needle mover, as one of my mentors says, or what is the Pokemon move, as one of my friends says. We all have different names. For me, it's like, what's a bold task, bold, daring task, but other people call it needle mover or Pokemon move, and we need to ask ourselves this all the time. Another way of asking it is this my Pareto? Is it the 20% that will move 80%? As you're doing the task, asking yourself, is this my Pareto, or is this just fun procrastination? Am I just playing around in Canva because why not, when I could be delegating this to someone? Or is this something that is actually meaningful, that will make a difference, that will move me forward? And it takes a lot of courage and honesty to confront ourselves with when we're taking actions that are actually not our Pokemon moves or needle movers or Pareto actions, and realizing it and acknowledging it and thinking, actually, this isn't the most important work. This isn't the one thing that will make the biggest difference. Let me pivot. And then stopping that action in mid-flow, or when you're just finished, reflecting on what's that one thing that really makes a difference, and then doing it. This is difficult, but we can train ourselves to think that way. We can train ourselves to catch ourselves and then shift our behavior toward things that are more important and make a bigger difference.
Oh, absolutely. Since Katie, I mentioned the term being overwhelmed. I'm curious, what do you do when you feel overwhelmed, stressed? Maybe you have too much on your plate. What are some of the practical things you do to get into a better place?
So a few things. First of all, there's a few things I do to try and avoid overwhelmed. We've already mentioned exercise and sleep and nutrition, but also single tasking. So I know that if I want to get overwhelmed, not sleeping well, skipping my exercise routine, and diving into multitasking first thing in the morning, guaranteed overwhelmed by 10 a.m. So I try to avoid those things, first of all. And if, in spite of single tasking, or maybe sleeping that day and not single tasking as much, or not taking enough breaks, what I tend to do is either go for a walk without listening to a podcast or anything, or I journal, or I meditate. I sit down, just meditate or listen to some sounds. And sometimes all of this works a bit, but not fully. And then it's just sort of allowing that to be the case. Just understanding that, okay, for whatever reason, right now, I'm less able to cope than other times. Also, I think this is important to know. It can be a situation or a time of your life or your work that isn't as busy as other times. So you can find yourself thinking, wow, but 2-3 months ago, going through this really intense, stressful time, etc., and I cope fine. How come right now only this little thing is happening, or this is a bit harder to manage and I can't cope? So I think it's very important not to compare. Different things are going on, different seasons, hormones, life, other circumstances. And so if at whatever moment you do feel more overwhelmed, or I feel more overwhelmed, I just acknowledge that, try and find some sort of root cause that I can solve if the walking and the meditation doesn't help. And I think it's just time off, resting. Seeing people helps me a lot as an extrovert. Resting in between the working days and trying to find joy in the activities I'm doing. I know that when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I know that some things can feel a bit like a drag, like, oh, now I have to do this. Oh, now I have to do this LinkedIn post. Oh, I have to get onto this call. Everything feels difficult because your body's tired. But of course, if you change your perception to, I get to do this, or if you change your perception to, wow, remember the time I used to work on the boats and I worked night shifts and this was really hard. Now all you need to do is write a LinkedIn post. It's going to be okay. Then changing that perception can help me to decrease the overwhelm, even if it doesn't solve the root cause. What do you do, Stoyan? What's your overwhelm coping strategy?
I love that you mentioned journaling, because that's the first thing I'll do. Literally, the first step is pausing. When you feel overwhelmed, you pause and you try to see the bigger picture. And whatever tool you use, I can suggest a couple, but you want to identify what is the cause of your stress. For me, I start journaling. I literally ask myself, what do I worry about? What am I stressed about? And I start writing down a list. Usually it's 5 to 10 things that I'm concerned about. Maybe I overcommitted. Maybe I haven't resolved certain problem and I don't know how to resolve it. Okay? There's a tool that we included in our first book. We called it Worry Clearing Tool. And it's probably kind of working for people like myself that love structure and measuring stuff. But it's basically you get a piece of paper and it has two parts. On the left part, you write down all the things that stress you that you can control. On the right side, you write all the things that stress you that you have no control over. Okay, so you make a list. I don't know. This thing with the economy changed. Well, we cannot control that, right? So the things on the left that I can control, I immediately brainstorm a few things I can do, either to resolve them or to find somebody that will help me find a solution if I don't have any. Let me ask this person. Let me call for advice. Let me call for help. Okay, I'm already feeling my stress is going down. I have some specific action steps. For the things I cannot control, I'm trying to look for the learning, the blessing, the opportunity. How can I let it go? How can I see it differently? What can I learn out of this? Can I laugh about it? Can I have fun with it? So once I'm done with this journaling, I have a list with action steps, and I just have to do it. As you said, what is the next thing I should do? Like from all these 20 things, why am I so stressed? Maybe I need to write 5 people and tell them I overextended myself. How about I send you this thing I promised not on Thursday but next week, right? I need to decrease the level of stress so I can get back in my zone and then be calmer, be less overwhelmed.
With clarity comes calm. I think once you're clear on what the actions are, on what things you can control, can't control, what you can do about it, with clarity and then action, because once you start taking the action, it feels like you're back empowered. You're no longer in that victim state of everything is overwhelming you. And to come back to what you were saying, focusing on what we can and can't control, I've noticed that there's quite a lot of things that fall into both categories. And then it's a matter of finding, okay, for this specific business project, this part I can't control. There's nothing I can do about, let's say you're waiting for an answer from a colleague or someone you're working with. They're away on holiday and you can't do anything about that aspect. But wait a minute, why don't I anticipate that next phase? Why don't I pre-prep while waiting for this answer? So I've seen that by trying to ask myself, is this something I can or can't control? Sometimes it gets messy in my head because it's both. It's both, well, I can't do anything about this because da-da-da-da. But wait, I could do. And so I think asking myself, what aspect of this situation can I impact and influence through taking action, which is what you're talking about, and what aspect of this situation do I just need to accept? The rest is up to faith, to the universe, whatever you want to call it. It depends what we're working on, but sometimes it's not in our hands. And by looking at it that way, that helps me to accept what needs to be accepted and then refocus on what are some actions I can take. And sometimes it can feel like the actions you can take, maybe it's 20% of the overall 100% of the current situation. So it can feel like, but this is a detail. What would really make a difference is if that person on holiday, for instance, answered you, but they're not going to answer you. And so then it's, well, hey, it's 20% or it's 10%. But still by doing that, I feel that we increase our self-esteem, we increase our self-confidence, we feel we're doing something about the problem. I find that helps a lot. And when it's totally out of our control, then it's practicing acceptance and letting go, which is a whole other topic. But I like this idea of gaining clarity, first of all. Which aspects of the project can we control, which ones can't we control, and then taking action depending.
Katie, a lot of the audience from the 15 Seconds community is creative people from the creative industries. And as a former movie producer and video producer, having an agency, I know how easy it is to get into the mindset of there is always more to be done and probably being productive but not feeling productive. I wonder, what do you do when you don't feel you're productive, and maybe there's feelings of guilt?
My first thought was I cry. When I feel that I'm not being productive and not making progress, I'm like, everything's a mess. The reality is probably check in. So looking at, where am I in the project? What have I done so far? Zooming out a bit, I think a lot of high achievers, probably most people listening to this, most people I tend to coach are all high achievers and high performers. We have this tendency to be future focused. What's next? What's the next goal? What's the next project? What's the big dream? What's the vision? Where are we going? Great, that keeps us moving. But in those moments, there can be that guilt. There can be that, oh, I'm not so productive. There can be that, oh, I'm behind, or I still have so much more to do. Or just sometimes even feeling a bit stuck, because sometimes we can be taking action regularly, but it takes a while before things kick off. I know that's happened several times in my business. And then if we just zoom out, oh yeah, right, I published a book, or this and that client literally wrote, 2 days ago how coaching was amazing and he was so happy. But we tend to sort of forget about this because we're so focused on the next milestone. And I remember it was 5 days, I think, after I published my book, and I was calling one of my closest friends, Monique, and I was on the phone with her, and she said, so how was the book? I'm like, oh, I'm already forgotten. I was like, on the day was great. I had a great day. At least I was focused that day. But the week after, whoosh, now I'm focused on this and this and this. And it was literally, I hadn't thought of it for the whole day. It was literally physically out of my head, so to speak. And so in those moments, it's quite nice to have friends or colleagues or team or someone saying, hey, but didn't you do that talk, 2 weeks ago? That must have been great. Or how is that project going? Or the book, or whatever it is. And I think that's quite nice. I definitely think as high achievers, we don't celebrate often enough, and we don't remember the achievements. And it's not all about the achievements, but it's true that in the moments where we can feel a bit stuck or a bit in a rut or behind or unproductive, it's quite nice to remember that we are actually making progress. It's just we seem to focus on the lack of progress and not the actual progress. How about you, Stoyan?
For me, just because of all these reasons, I like to remind myself on a daily basis. You can call it a gratitude journaling, achievement journaling, but I will sit down and write down what are all the good things that are happening. And sometimes that could be something I've done or something that happened that I didn't do anything. It just happened and it's a good news. Something good happened, right? But I like to focus on the positive because, and researching on the second book now, I've seen some research studies that show how many times our mind is more likely to focus on the negative. So knowing that, it's like I need to really focus on all the good stuff that's happening. Okay, I did not manage to finish these 2 or 3 things that I planned to. Fair enough. But these 17 things, it went really well. Actually, there were 3 or 4 things that I didn't plan to do that managed to get done. Good job, Stoyan. Nice. So I think for me, it's just reminding myself on a daily basis, things are fine. Even if I have the worst day, it's okay. It's going to be a better day. Did I do my best? I did. Sometimes doing your best means going for a walk, sleeping, taking a day off. That's the best thing you can do in the big scale of things.
Amazing. Wonderful. Well, I think, Stoyan, we could probably talk for the whole day, but maybe let's quickly review before we leave for today. What are some of the core things we discussed? We went through the 4 pillars, amongst others, of sleep, exercise, nutrition, and rest and meditation. We looked at how maybe we prioritize daily review, weekly reviews, how to manage overwhelm, the importance of journaling and clarity. What are some of the key takeaways that you remember, Stoyan, from our talk?
On top of what you just said, we discussed the importance of planning time to plan your time. In other words, having your own ritual in which you are not doing anything, you're just reflecting and setting the intentions, the outcomes for the next day. Always be driven by the outcome. And if you don't know what's the outcome, maybe that's your outcome, to clarify the outcome. We also talk about how do we deal with overwhelm, and what do we do if we're not feeling productive. Maybe to finish up with that, whatever you took out of this podcast, first of all, take one thing, take one idea, and implement it. Whatever, maybe there's one specific thing that clicked with you, take it and put it into action. That's the first thing I'm gonna say. But secondly, nothing works for everybody. We're all unique. We're all trying to figure it out. So don't take things for kind of like universal truths. Get inspired and see what could be something that works for you. Test it, try it, and hopefully that's gonna work for you.
Yes, and we all learn from experience, trial, error, trial, error. So if Stoyan and I have some rituals such as the daily planning or the weekly review, it's because we've realized that that works well for us. But every person has their own system. I think it's always just about that Kaizen, always about the constant incremental progress along the journey and actually enjoying the journey, not having the goals in mind and putting our intent and focus and enjoyment on the present and what we're currently doing. Thank you,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Katie, for being with me. Always a pleasure having conversations with you on these specific topics. And I just want to invite everybody, if you haven't bought your ticket to 15 Seconds Festival yet, we look forward to seeing you in Graz in June. So make sure to go check it out, get your ticket, and it's such an incredible experience. Make sure to join this year.
Absolutely, 200% agree with you, Stoyan. 15 Seconds, magical event, wonderful, wonderful place. If you haven't bought your ticket yet, do get it, and we look forward to seeing you there also. Thank you, Stoyan.